But now let's dive into Project 2025. What's been done, what's coming, and what we do next. A huge thank you to Ken for doing a lot of the research for tonight's topic. And we're going to do a check-in on Project 2025, a quick reminder of what that is. A roughly 900-page blueprint the Heritage Foundation published in 2023 to reshape the federal government with a personnel database and a stack of ready-to-sign executive orders. Independent trackers are following 300 plus specific objectives across dozens of agencies. According to the Project 2025 tracker, overall progress on implementation is at 54%. That means we still have time to stop the parts that haven't been implemented and reverse the parts that have. So here's the lens for the whole hour. For each area, we'll ask two things. What did Project 2025 propose, and how is it actually going? And I want you to notice a pattern. The pieces that move fastest are the ones the president can do alone through executive orders and agency rules. The pieces that need Congress are slower, and the courts have been the main speed bump. That pattern tells us where our leverage is. Go ahead and drop one word in the chat. How are you feeling coming into tonight? Worried? Scared? Stressed? Yeah. Who said ready? Sharon? That's great. Angry, powerful, looking for a fight. Good. I'm so glad that we have people here on the whole spectrum of emotions about this.
Can I
So
say
let's
it
get,
since I'm in bed?
you can say how you're feeling in just a couple words, Jeffrey.
We're worried for one thing, because I wasn't thinking about it for a second until you just brought it up.
All right. Well, we'll talk
Yeah.
more later. All right. So first up, labor. Project 2025 wanted to shrink worker protections and weaken the independent agencies that even measure the economy. So here's the scorecard. Overtime pay rolled back. Project 2025 proposes to lower the salary threshold for low-income, non-hourly employees to be eligible for overtime. A Biden rule would have raised the salary cutoff for overtime eligibility to about $58,000, but the Trump Labor Department let it die and kept the 2019 threshold of $35,500. So a salaried worker making just over 35K gets no overtime. For perspective, the 2026 poverty line for a family of four is around $33,000. Economic Development, or EDA. Project 2025, or sorry, the Economic Development Administration is known as EDA. Project 2025 proposes to eliminate the EDA grants programs that distribute funds appropriated by legislation to provide additional relief to address the continued impacts of COVID-19. Trump's 2027 budget proposal requests only $20 million for the EDA for salaries and expenses to conduct an orderly closeout of the agency. That said, it's worth remembering that the president's budget is only a request outlining the president's priorities, and Congress has the power of the purse. In 2026, Congress funded the EDA at 2023 to 2025 levels of $466 million, despite Trump requesting only $30 million. Child labor. Project 2025 proposed amending Labor Department rules to let minors work in more hazardous conditions. Violations are up roughly fivefold over the last decade. Several GOP-led states loosened child labor laws in 2026, and Congress introduced the Child Labor Act to raise penalties tenfold. In the chat, anyone here affected by overtime rules or know a young worker in a state loosening child labor laws?
All right, the safety net. Next, the programs people rely on to get by. Some of this moved through the one big beautiful bill, or as I call it, the one big bullshit bill, and some through budget fights that aren't settled yet. SNAP and food assistance, Project 2025 proposed restricting food aid by imposing work requirements. Since November 2025, able-bodied adults without dependents must work or train 80 hours a month. Exemptions do exist, but the paperwork burden is the real bite, and it varies county to county. I just spent a year unemployed, and if I had to document 80 hours a month just to get food and find a job and get what you need to do to get unemployment is very hard. So this is a actually huge burden where they're taking food out of people's mouths. Head Start, Project 2025 proposed eliminating Head Start preschool entirely. In the administration's 2027 budget, funding stayed flat at about $12 billion, but a grant freeze attempt and federal staffing cuts disrupted local programs. The Government Accountability Office found HHS unlawfully withheld $825 million in Head Start funds, and flat funding doesn't keep pace with inflation. I mean, the Head Start programs are funded with these grants. They don't make money as daycares from their students because it's for people who are underserved. So that's a double whammy. Veterans, Project 2025 proposed limiting which disabilities qualify veterans for benefits. There has been no formal charge to change to eligibility, but civilian workforce cuts and canceled VA contracts have made benefits harder for veterans to actually access. Finally, public transit. Project 2025 proposed eliminating federal funding for transit projects. The 2027 budget calls for gutting transit and rail funding by $426 million, but it's up to Congress to make the appropriations. I mean, who takes food away from poor people, kicks their kids out of preschool, and then screws veterans? Which safety net program matters most in your community? Name it in the chat.
I know that I've needed food stamps, unemployment, Medicaid, and all of these bars are making it almost impossible for people to access the services that they need. So Ashley said food assistance, Aaron said veterans, Medicare. Yeah, these are all huge targets for the Trump administration. So next up, reproductive rights and healthcare. A mixed, fast-moving picture. Some Project 2025 goals stalled. Others are advancing through the FDA and the courts. Medicare drug prices. Project 2025 proposed undoing Medicare's power to negotiate lower drug prices for seniors. The administration expanded it to 15 more drugs, and the Supreme Court declined to hear the industry's challenge, a rare reversal of the Project 2025 goal. Abortion pills by mail. Project 2025 proposed enforcing criminal prohibitions from the 1873 Comstock Act, which bans the mailing of obscene material and articles used to produce abortion. The DOJ says it only applies if the sender intends an abortion, which is difficult to prove, and the president has been inconsistent about enforcing it. So keep an eye on this one. Mifepristone. Project 2025 proposed reversing FDA approval of mifepristone or adding stricter rules. Mifepristone is one of the two drugs that are combined in most medication abortions. Telehealth prescribing and mail pharmacy dispensing remain legal nationwide. The Supreme Court left that access intact in 2024 on standing grounds, but it's under renewed threat. In 2025, on the stated basis of a scientifically dubious paper on mifepristone safety, RFK Jr. directed the FDA to undertake a review of its regulations of the drug. He also stated that policy changes will ultimately go through the White House through President Trump, removing any doubt that the FDA review is anything but politically motivated. In the Louisiana v. FDA court case, the Fifth Circuit moved on May 1st this year to reinstate an in-person dispensing requirement nationwide. The Supreme Court stayed that rollback on May 14th, keeping mail and pharmacy access available while the case proceeds, but it's temporary, with an expedited Fifth Circuit appeal set for this fall that could send the issue back to the Supreme Court. Misoprostol, which is the second drug typically combined with mifepristone in medication abortions, can be used on its own, but misoprostol alone can make the process longer and more painful with more side effects. The mailing of these drugs right now is one of the only ways that women in states with abortion bans can access abortion right now. So this is hugely important. Next up, Medicare Advantage. Project 2025 proposed pushing seniors toward private Medicare Advantage plans that worsen outcomes. Payments to those private insurers are rising about $13 billion in 2027, with consumer protections rolled back. Medical privacy. Project 2025 proposed removing the post-Dobbs HIPAA guidance that shields reproductive health records from law enforcement. In 2025, a Texas court vacated the Biden rule that had strengthened those protections. HHS, now under the Trump administration, declined to defend the rule and let the appeal deadline pass without appealing. So, as of now, the 2024 rule's reproductive health protections are vacated nationwide and unenforceable, and the litigation that could have revived them has ended. If you're comfortable, has access to any care of any kind gotten harder for you or someone you love this year? Drop one line in the chat.
All right, discrimination and civil rights. Project 2025 aimed to weaken the tools the federal government uses to enforce civil rights. Title VII, the disparate impact. Project 2025 proposed revising Title VII of the Civil Rights Act to remove a key enforcement tool. Title VII isn't very well known, but an April 2025 executive order told agencies to stop using disparate impact theory. Disparate impact means that employers, housing providers, and other entities can be held liable for discrimination if a seemingly neutral policy disproportionately harms a certain group. An executive order doesn't change the law, so it's still valid under Title VII, and people can sue privately, but the administration is unlikely to pursue investigations or bring new litigation on behalf of plaintiffs. The census. Project 2025 proposed adding a citizenship question and reviewing race and ethnicity questions to undercount certain groups. The Trump administration's first-term push, first a citizenship question the Supreme Court blocked in 2019 is pretextual, then a 2020 memo to exclude undocumented immigrants from the apportionment count, was aimed at reducing the political representation of areas with many non-citizens. The apportionment memo was never ruled on by the court before it was rescinded, and the effort has returned in his second term. If you want to point to something that's going to change how elections happen and how they vote between this and the gerrymandering, there's your smoking gun. Gender Policy Council. Project 2025 proposed eliminating the White House Gender Policy Council and creating a Life and Family Office. Trump immediately dissolved the White House Gender Policy Council by executive order and created the White House Faith Office. It is worth noting that a version of this White House office has been established by every Democratic president since Clinton and subsequently dissolved by every Republican president. Environmental Justice. Project 2025 proposed eliminating the EPA's Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. The EPA's environmental justice function begun in 1992 under George H.W. Bush as the Small Office of Environmental Equity and consolidated and scaled up in 2022 into the Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. Grew to more than 200 staff by 2024. In February 2025, the administration placed roughly 170 of them on administration leave and then ordered the office closed the following month. LGBTQ workplace protections. Project 2025 proposed restricting Bostock v. Clayton County, which shields LGBTQ workers from discrimination. This rides on Title VII, so the disparate impact point we just covered applies here too, which makes it harder to prove workplace discrimination. Which civil rights rollbacks worry you the most? Type it in the chat.
You're right, Katie, that the feds are withholding FEMA funds in different regions. All of them. Yeah, I hear you guys. LGBTQ rights, definitely. That concerns me very much as well as part of that community. All right, climate and pollution. On climate, one move this year was genuinely enormous. The EPA endangerment finding. Project Project 2025 proposed updating the finding that requires the EPA to curb emissions of CO2, methane, and other greenhouse gases. In February 2026, the EPA repealed it outright, wiping out vehicle emission standards going back over a decade. A coalition of 25 state attorneys general is currently suing. NOAA. Project 2025 proposed dismantling the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Hundreds of staff were fired and contracts canceled, with the 2027 budget seeking roughly a 25% cut. This is the agency that forecasts our storms. Oil and gas leasing. Project 2025 proposed pushing Interior to conduct oil and gas lease sales on public and offshore land to the maximum extent. The one big bill of bullshit cut the royalty rate companies pay from 16.7 to 12.5%, revived the loophole around competitive building, and eliminated administrative fees. More drilling, less to taxpayers. Has extreme weather hit in your area this past? Share where you're joining from and one impact. We've got a lot of big fires this year in Colorado already, especially in southern Colorado right now. And it sounds like on the western slope, and a huge drought.
We have the second biggest fire in Colorado history, currently burning with zero containment. Next is education. Here are the quick hits because a lot happened here, and this is very near to dear in my heart, very personal. Student loans and repayment. Project 2025 proposed cutting federal student loan programs for parents, grad students, and immigrants. The one big bill of bullshit capped parent loans at $20,000 per year, $65,000 total per child, and professional grad loans at $50,000 per year and $200,000 total. Separately, a court blocked the SAVE repayment plan in March 2026, and new income-based plans dropped the forgiveness pathway. So I have a daughter that's in college, and she's at a state school because it's cheaper than the private schools that she was accepted to. It cost me $30,000 in loans last year to make sure that she can go to school. That's at the cheapest state school she can go to. This is never going to work. I've been paying student loans since 1992, and my total just went over $100,000. And there's no help for me until I die. Title IX and LGBTQ students. Project 2025 proposed stripping LGBTQ student protections, redefining sex as sex assigned at birth only, and having the Office for Civil Rights stop collecting the non-binary category in its national civil rights data collection. In January 2025, Title IX was rolled back to the 2020 rule, which limits Title IX sexual harassment claims to those based on sex assigned at birth. LGBTQ protections were rescinded, and in April 2026, the Education Department tore up agreements protecting trans students. University research funding. Project 2025 proposed capping the indirect cost rate universities receive for research. Where it stands. In February 2025, NIH tried a 15% cap. Courts struck it down, and the appeals court upheld that on January 5th, 2026. This is a win worth naming because that research money is huge. Students, parents, educators, how's this landing where you are? Drop your answers in the chat.
The amounts that they've capped student loans at are absolutely abhorrent. Aaron, go ahead.
So when I went to college, I went to a state college and I couldn't get any Pell Grants because my parents supposedly made too much money, right? Um, I took out $24,000 in loans, and after 1 year forbearance, I owe over $95,000. And this is insanity. And I was under a repayment program, and I got into the Save Act. And then now I'm getting threats that if I don't refinance my loan now, I'm gonna go back into forbearance. So I understand like what people are going through, like I'm kind of scared just to call them, but I know it's not gonna be a big deal. I'll call them for 5 minutes. We'll get over it. But I understand the fear that this causes people. Like $10 extra a month for some people is too much.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of people won't ever be able to pay off their student loans, and that's what the Save Act was supposed to help with. So let's get some good people back in office and see what we can do.
And my loans were supposed to be forgiven after 20 years, but after some of those short phone calls, I was told to change my repayment status or consolidate my loans or any variety of things which reset that counter every time I did it on their advice, trying to get it forgiven. And now they're trying to get rid of that or move it out to 30 years. And even then, my loans wouldn't be forgiven.
All right, let's jump into immigration. This is the section that pisses me off more than anything else. So this is the area that Project 2025 spent the most ink on, over 175 immigration provisions, with its architects, people like Tom Homan and Stephen Miller, running the policy now. This is where the plan and the reality line up most tightly. Detention funding. Project 2025 proposed a massive enforcement build-out, including funding for 100,000 detention beds. The one big bill of bullshit poured nearly $170 billion into immigration enforcement over 4 years, about 45 billion of that earmarked just for detention. And the largest such build out in US history. And in June, Congress gave ICE another $70 billion. More detention. Project 2025. Oh, sorry, we just went over that. And detention and tent camps. Project 2025 proposed a massive detention build out. And people in ICE detention rose from 40,000 to 69,000 by early 2026, the highest ever across 100 plus new facilities, including reopened state prisons, county jails, military-based tent camps, and tent camps like Alligator Alcatraz, which was fortunately recently closed, but it doesn't mean they aren't going to open another one. Discretionary releases fell about 87%. By one analysis, the detention money alone could fund as many as 135,000 beds at once, larger than the entire federal prison system. Bond hearings. There's a split among the appeals courts across the country regarding whether people who are undocumented even deserve a bond hearing. Thankfully, the 10th Circuit, which covers Colorado, recently ruled that they can have a bond hearing, although many are still denied for arbitrary reasons or none at all. This will definitely end up in the Supreme Court soon, and unfortunately, I'm not holding my breath. If the Supreme Court rules that undocumented immigrants don't deserve a bond hearing, the only way they can have one is if a federal judge approves a habeas petition. Expedited removal. Project 2025 proposed expanding fast-track deportations nationwide beyond the traditional 100-mile border zone. Interior deportations, within that zone rose roughly fivefold in 2025, with street arrests up more than tenfold and far more people with no criminal convictions swept up. A majority of the people held prisoner in the ICE camp in Aurora have never been charged with, let alone convicted of a crime. Sensitive locations. Project 2025 proposed ending the policy that kept ICE away from schools, hospitals, and churches. The decades-old protection was rescinded on day one in January of 2025, and enforcement has shown up at all three. Local police as immigration agents. Project 2025 proposed expanding 287G agreements that deputize local police and making localities cooperate or lose federal funding. 287G agreements jumped from 135 when Trump took office to more than 1,400 by early 2026, a more than tenfold increase. Temporary protected status. Project 2025 called on Congress to repeal temporary protected status, or TPS, designations. The administration terminated TPS for Venezuela, Afghanistan, Cameroon, Nepal, Nicaragua, and Honduras. And last month, the Supreme Court cleared the way to end it for Haiti and Syria too, ruling those terminations can't be challenged in court. Temporary protected status allows people from countries affected by war or disaster to live and work here legally on a renewable basis. In the past, the administration could only revoke it once conditions in those countries significantly improved, but that's no longer the case. Asylum bars and the Remain in Mexico policy. Project 2025 proposed reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy and layered regulatory bars to asylum. Asylum access has been sharply curtailed. A February ruling found third country deportations unlawful, but that litigation is ongoing and higher courts have since let parts of the program proceed. The human cost. In January 2026, 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, were killed by federal agents in separate Minneapolis incidents, sparking protests and bipartisan calls to investigate enforcement tactics. It's sad that it took the death of 2 white U.S. citizens to wake the country up when over 50 immigrants have died in ICE custody since Trump took office. But at the same time, I'm still glad that more people are paying attention. Immigrant rights work is local. Drop in the chat one thing you or your network is already doing, whether that's rapid response, court accompaniment, know your rights trainings, or one thing that you want to learn how to do. Aaron asked if they're going to investigate those murders. No, they're not. Not even the ones that are literally have concrete evidence that they were murders. Aaron said his group is singing. Court accompaniment, rapid response.
Can I say mine?
Yes.
I have an idea. We should make our own like Project 2025 that will not only undo everything the original Project 2025 did, but also move America in the progressive way.
That's a good idea. All right, Morgan, go ahead.
All right. What's likely coming before the end of the term? Last stretch. Everything we've covered so far has already happened. This section is different. It's the fights that are still coming, the ones where the outcome isn't yet decided. The term runs to January 2029, so there's a lot of runway. Here's what's on the near horizon. Abortion pills go back before the courts this fall. After the Supreme Court kept mifepristone available by mail in May, the underlying case, Louisiana v. FDA, is now on expedited track with the Fifth Circuit arguments set for the August 31st to September 3rd sitting. Whatever that court decides is likely to bounce back up to the Supreme Court, so the access that's in place right now is provisional. And it's not the only front. Senator Josh Hawley has introduced a bill to pull the FDA's approval of mifepristone entirely, and new state laws, Mississippi's took effect July 1st, are criminalizing distribution of abortion medication. The rest of the civil service purge. The first round of scheduled policy career reclassifications hit about 8,000 federal jobs. but the government's own estimate is roughly 50,000. So the large majority of the loyalty-based reclassifications and the firings they enable are still to come. Watch for the next executive order naming more positions. Again, this is something that bothers me a lot. If you take everybody that Doge and all of these firings got rid of, it pales compared to the price of the ballroom and the reflecting pond and the 250 fireworks show and the UFC fight. All of that is so much more than anything they could have saved by firing all of these people. And now people aren't getting services. There's a possible third funding bill. After two reconciliation packages in under a year, there's talk of a reconciliation 3.0. Trump has floated another $350 billion in defense spending, and some House Republicans want deeper safety net cuts to offset it. Nothing's introduced yet, but the machinery is warming up. Be careful with this, because a lot of the really horrible things that they can't get a majority to pass through Congress, they put in budget reconciliation bills that they only need a majority to pass, and do it that way instead of the way laws are supposed to be passed. Surging arrests. Project 2025 called for a dramatic ramp up in interior arrests to drive mass deportations. Early in the term, Stephen Miller set a target of 3,000 arrests a day. Arrests seemed to die down after the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, but recently enforcement has accelerated sharply. At the end of June, ICE arrested about 10,000 people in just 5 days, roughly 2,000 people a day, with one Saturday topping 2,400. With officials described as the new arrest standard. The surge came after the workforce of ICE agents more than doubled, from about 10,000 officers to roughly 22,000 officers in a matter of months, and shifted to quieter, less publicized operations. Notably, according to Track, more than 70% of those ICE detainees have no criminal convictions. So the pretense that they're cracking down on immigration is a lie. The wild cards, the Insurrection Act and the Comstock Act. Neither has been formally deployed yet, but both keep surfacing. The administration has leaned on the 1798 Alien Enemies Act as a substitute for the Insurrection Act, and Justice Thomas, dissenting in the Mifepristone case, argued that mailing abortion pills already violates Comstock, a signal that at least some on the court would welcome the fight. These are the ones to keep an eye on. Of everything tonight, which one fight do you want Solidarity Warriors to prioritize next month? Vote in the chat with the topic.
What do y'all want to see us focus on? Katie says
For
midterm prep.
getting ready. The midterms are important, but I was saying the midterm, because if we lose the midterms, we'll have to deal with more of Trump's, right?
Yeah, so well, that'll be a second vote for the midterms. Sharon says stop ICE. Dee said the SAVE Act. Immigration, register new voters, educating the populace, midterm prep, immigration, voting rights, always immigration, midterm elections, and the Insurrection Act. So the big picture, most of Project 2025 is moving through executive orders and agency rules. The courts are the speed bump and the Congress gated pieces are leverage. That's not despair, that's a map. So 3 asks before we go. 1, look at the fight you voted for in the chat. That's your focus. 2, commit to at least 1 action this week. Rapid response, use 5 calls to call your legislators or attend or organize an event. Number 3, bring 1 new person next Wednesday. The link to share with them to sign up, I'll put that in the chat. And then there are 2 resources for you, the Project 2025 Tracker and Democracy Forward People's Guide. Aaron?
Yeah, I wanted to mention this earlier, but I totally forgot. I'm not involved with this group, but it's the Tulsa County Indivisible group. They were just featured on Rachel Maddow last night. They did a human form of 2547, so using the 25th Amendment to get rid of the current administration. I just wanted to give them a shout out. Rachel's been really good to us. We've been on her show at least 5 times, but this isn't my group. But I just want to give them 100% just amazing grace.
Very cool. You'll have to give me her phone number.
Good people
Yeah,
doing good work
100.
are always welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we love the Tulsa local indivisible. Is I think they're called Tulsa County Indivisible, and it's Susan and Susan, and they've gotten Steve Schmidt and what's the guy from Texas that ran for Senate? Anyway, they've Beto O'Rourke. They've done a lot of really good stuff here.
Awesome. I'm going to give you guys one more thing to drop in the chat before we do Q&A. So now it's time to commit before we wrap up tonight. Type I'm in plus the one action you'll take this week. And then Sean, we can get ready or started with questions.
Okay, the first question I have is how quickly will we lose free speech?
I think that depends on how much we use it. I was just listening to a podcast today about defiance and how the price of defiance goes down the more people are involved. Because we have safety in numbers, we can be defiant without as much risk to ourselves. So the more people who raise their voices and use their First Amendment, the more likely we are to get to keep it.
I would make the argument that we're already losing it. It's not completely gone yet, but if you look at what's happening at CBS with their news department, if you're looking at the late night comedians that are getting fired and losing their shows based on what they're saying, these are all attempts to stifle speech and dissent, and it's happening now. Are they going to start arresting people for what they say? I think they would if they could. I think they haven't consolidated power enough to do that, but I think it's definitely their goal and something they want to do.
Well, they did arrest someone for playing the Imperial March following a National Guard officer, but they got dropped.
I would also add with the convictions in Texas, that was a free speech thing too.
That's true.
I mean, the woman got 30 years, if I remember right, just for the zines.
Yeah, so if y'all don't know, down in Texas, there was an incident where there was a protest, and one person did fuck up real bad and shot an ICE officer in the neck. And I think they got 80 years, which is still a very high sentence for what happened. But all of the other people involved got sentences for 30 years, 50 years. The woman Sean's talking about literally moved a box of zines, little folded paper, tiny magazines, and they were all charged as terrorists, as Antifa.
And I think the latest conviction was 6 years for something similar to that too. And that I think went down yesterday or today.
Okay.
Everything's coming so fast it's hard to keep up anymore.
Yeah,
Okay.
the main guy got 100 years. The lowest was 30 years. If you found one from 6 years, that must be another conspiracy charge.
Liz asks if they cut off funds for public transit, do they cut off funds for interstate highways too?
So I haven't seen what the cuts to federal highway money is, but with there have been efforts to repeal the gas tax, which goes to fund roads and bridges and transportation stuff. And given the way that they've been cutting everything, if they can cut something, especially to a blue state, they're going to do it because to them, they don't care if the roads are bad because they're going to do whatever they want and have somebody else drive them. So I would expect it, but I don't have evidence.
And I think Michelle asked the biggest question of the night. Who owns America?
We do. This is our country.
I
Amen.
was going to say the billionaires.
Don't be so pessimistic.
That's my
All right.
job.
Laurie asked if they want to deport all the immigrants, then why are they housing them in detention centers, deporting them instead of imprisonment?
Because they're making money off it. So the facilities, the corporations that own them, like Geo Group, make $150 per person per day that they're there. So there are some people that have signed voluntary deportation papers that are waiting to be flown home that have been sitting there for sometimes over a month because Geo continues to make money off of them.
And they need a valid deportation order. Like there are legal reasons why they can't just pick people up and put them on planes, despite the fact that they've been picking people up and putting them on planes. There are some limitations to what they should be doing, and keeping people detained in their mind is better than letting them go for no cost or deporting them when they don't have the paperwork to do it.
If
Linda
due
asked,
process were still a real thing, I would say it's because they all deserve their day in court. But sometimes they get that day and they don't even have a translator for them. They don't have any way to fight their case. So due process is definitely not alive in immigration court. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
where is all the money coming from to pay for
This
all this?
is going to go in the national deficit, which taxpayers are going to pay off.
The money for what?
The
All
budget
of
and
his,
ICE and everything. Everything that's being apportioned through the funding bills.
Yeah, those are going to come from taxes and taxes on blue states because blue states pay a lot more taxes than red states do. Um, but also, Project 2025 was funded by the Heritage Foundation through dark money that nobody knows where it's coming from, and has been put together as a think tank to come up with ways to implement these kinds of things. And people have donated millions of dollars to them to do it.
Linda, go ahead.
I wrote that question, where's the money coming from? Because of the, giant increases in defense spending, for ICE funding, for Homeland Security funding. I mean, many military or militaristic type things. I mean, I know it's just adding to the deficit, but it's maddening, and that he's going around Congress to, again, just to do what he wants. So that's my
It is.
I think it's important at this point to point out that Republicans cutting social services is a plan to enrich the rich. That way you can cut their taxes, say the government is out of money, and then cut services to the poor. It's a way to make people suffer if you don't have enough money and you don't make enough money. And it is premeditated in the way that they do this. So it's not, there's a reason that the military isn't getting cut. There's a reason that ICE isn't getting cut. There's a reason that Congress isn't getting a pay cut. And they are cutting all of the services that people really rely on.
How do we maintain accurate voter representation?
Not sure I understand. Do you, Morgan?
I think it's, kind of the idea of elected officials representing the people, and how between the gerrymandering and changing the census and moving everything around, people aren't being represented anymore. In addition to that, Republicans stopped representing anybody besides their MAGA constituents a long time ago. They don't care about it, so they're not going to fix it. And with the changes to gerrymandering in the Civil Rights Act, I don't have much faith in this administration or Congress or anything that we can do directly through the paths that the Constitution and the government is formed on to bring that back. It's one of the things that I feel they have deliberately gone out of their way to break to keep themselves in power. So the way we do it is we go out and we protest and we don't let them do it, and we let them know that we are not going to stand for it. And then we get new people elected, even against the odds of gerrymandering, and throw the people out because that's how our system is supposed to work. I see you, Maria.
I I just wanted to put in a message that we should not sign any of the petitions that are out there right now getting signatures, except for petition 195, which is for a progressive taxation scheme. All the others are advancing conservative causes, even if they don't sound like it. They're supported by Advance Colorado, which is a conservative think tank kind of organization. And back to the earlier question about roads, there's one called Restore Our Roads. I think it's ballot petition number 125, I think. Anyways, that would greatly increase funding for more roads, not for transit, and it would take it away from transit. So don't vote for it. That's all.
And those are Colorado ballot initiatives,
Yeah.
just so people know. There are a variety of them here, but when it comes to ballot initiatives nationwide, Republicans are trying to make it harder. They're trying to make it so you don't need a simple majority, you need a super majority, or instead of a number of petitions statewide, you need a percentage of petitions in each congressional district, which in red states makes it nearly impossible to get something on the ballot. So, ballot initiatives are one of the ways that we could do something like overturn gerrymandering. And I've seen a lot of good progressive stuff happen in red states through ballot initiatives. And there's a concerted effort to make that harder or impossible.
Frank, go ahead.
What about my idea for creating our own project 2025? Who do you think could do it?
I think organizing would be really important in that type of strategic planning. The problem is exactly what you're asking. Who's going to do it? And more importantly, who's going to be able to unite the left so that they could all agree on the same plan and follow it? And that's much harder than it is on the Republican side, where everybody falls in line. The left simply doesn't do that, and it's going to make it really hard to get something in place that's been as effective as 2025 has.
Esma, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, asked how to stay well informed with very little extra time each day. Who has some ideas on that? I see some good ideas in the chat. Oh, Karen said if we had a site to submit some ideas so a plan can be started, I can build a page on our website for that.
Yeah, and that's right. And then anything else you look at Mobilize for, right? Like there's going to be stuff in your local area, your region, your state, the country. There's a lot of different ways to stay in touch. And if you guys want to email, Jeffrey will definitely be happy to talk to you every day of the week.
Are they going
Right.
to deploy
Go ahead,
military
Sean.
in cities like they have said they were going to?
I am worried that that might happen around elections. But I think what's worse is that just threatening to have ICE at polling places, even though it would be illegal for them to be there, armed. Just threatening that will make people afraid to go vote. Morgan, do you have thoughts on that?
Um, I'm thinking about the staying informed. My faith in the general journalistic integrity of the mainstream news media has been fading quickly since the beginning of this administration. The nice thing about the internet is it's hard to constrain the truth. You just need to find it. And you need to find the sources that are not being influenced the way the major news carriers are. There's a lot on Substack. There are a lot of foreign news agencies that are going to give you a much more accurate representation, like the BBC and Al Jazeera. And there are a lot of other good places that still exist. I'd argue that public radio and public television still have retained a lot of their journalistic independence because they're losing their government funding anyway. So they've got nothing to lose by reporting the truth. So do I have a lot of places that I'm going to point you to say this is absolute truth? No, but the truth is out there, and it may take some digging to find it.
No matter how deep you try to bury the truth, it'll eventually grow and sprout like wildfire.
Makes sense. All right, go ahead, Sean.
Karen asks, I've tried reading the Saved Act. There are several different versions. Does anyone know which one they are trying to pass?
Let me see if I can find like the most current version of the Save Act.
So the idea behind the SAVE Act is always going to be the same. The changes that they're going to make are going to be ways that they can try and get it passed. So they tried the most extreme version first, and when that didn't go anywhere, they're tweaking it and trying to make changes along the way to see if they can get it pushed through. Again, probably during budget reconciliation, because the Democrats, at least one of them, should stand up and filibuster it in the Senate if it gets that far. But I don't know which particular version that they're doing now. But if they water it down or make changes or do anything with it, it's because that's the best that they can get out of it. It doesn't mean that their intent has changed at all.
And I do agree with Maria. Heather Cox Richardson is a good one to listen to. She is a good source.
I'm typing up a whole list of all the podcasts that I listen to.
You know, I like Jon Stewart. I mean, he just has a sense for things and is able to present it in a way that not only is it funny and entertaining, it's saying things that other people aren't saying and can't say. And he's not restrained by being afraid to lose his job or needing to, you know, kowtow to the administration. And, you know, everything from the 9/11 firefighters and police all the way up to what he's doing now, I think is a great place to start.
But any of the like network news shows, you can usually find a copy of the podcast so you can catch it later.
And I'll just put a plug in, even though it is considered mainstream media, I do think the New York Times has made at least an effort to keep their independence and keep reporting in ways that other newspapers and news outlets aren't.
And that's especially true for the journalists on the bottom.